Dr. Kilgore.
Thank you, Laura, and thank all of you for coming. It's an honor to be here. I could burn half my time reading the title of the slides, so take your picture and we'll move ahead very quick. Little bit of background. You've already heard a little bit about diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. I'll give you what I think is most important for this study here. This is a very aggressive form of NHL, and in patients who with this diagnosis who relapse or for whose condition, whose cancer recurs after 2 or more lines of prior treatment, treatment options for those patients have traditionally been somewhat limited. You already heard about CAR T. This is a new option for these patients, which has recently come onto the market. The goal of this study was to look at real-world data, the real-world use of CAR T, and to describe the demographic clinical characteristics of the patients and compare healthcare utilization, costs, and outcomes pre and post CAR T therapy. There are 2 drugs approved for use in this country by the FDA. They came on the market latter half of 2017. The first claims for CAR T appear in the Medicare claims database in October of 2017, and those claims and the next year of experience with CAR T in the Medicare population are included in the study. So the first year of real-world experience. This is the first, we believe, real-world look at patient CAR T experience. Medicare fee-for-service claims subsequent to the approval. Real quick, source of the data, the 100% Medicare fee-for-service Part A and B claims data. If that needs some clarification, you can ask me later. Patients with DLBCL or a related indicated condition for whom we had complete data 6 months prior to CAR T and 6 months after, or in the after, or they were deceased. So what did we find? We found 207 patients who met those criteria. What they looked like, median age of 71 years. Compare that to the pivotal trials where the median age of those patients was 56 to 58. Patients were largely male and white. One other statistic of note, Charlson Comorbidity Index greater than 2. If you're not familiar with the CCI, commonly used for many decades, measure of how sick you are, and in terms of how many conditions you have that can be validly estimated using claims data. What's so special about CCI greater than 2? If you have advanced cancer, okay, you have a 2 if there's nothing else wrong with you. 78% of these patients had a CCI greater than 2. It's an indication of multiple diseases in addition to their lymphoma. And I will add that 51% of these patients had specific chronic conditions, heart disease, chronic pulmonary disease, and chronic kidney disease, that in many cases would have eliminated them, would have excluded them from the clinical trials. Real quick, outcomes, healthcare utilization and cost. First, outcomes, 73% of the patients remained alive at the end of the 6-month follow-up. You have the overall survival. We required at least 6 months of continuous enrollment, but we have data that goes out to about 21 months. And as you can see from the graph, the median survival had not yet been achieved. So over 50% of the patients were still alive at the end of almost 2 years. Patients spent utilization. We looked at hospitalizations, length of stay, emergency department visits. Patients spent 17% less time in the hospital, 6 months, in the 6 months after the CAR T than in that preceding. During the same 2 time periods, number of patients that needed to visit the ED, the ER, were reduced by 1/3. And I will add, the total number of emergency department visits was cut by almost in half. Healthcare costs, quick digression, this is healthcare. What are we talking about costs, okay? In this study, these are using claims data. These were what are called technically allowed amounts, otherwise known as paid amounts. So the costs we looked at were the amount that someone paid. CMS, the patient, other sources if the patient has supplemental insurance. Overall healthcare costs, exclusive of the costs associated with CAR T itself, were 39% less in the 6 months after CAR T than in the 6 months preceding it. So a significant reduction in costs. I've told you about, I've given you a very quick summary of what happened pre and what happened post. What about in the middle? What about the CAR T procedure itself? For the vast majority of these patients, remember this is the first year of CAR T data, most of these patients received CAR T in the inpatient facility. Median length of stay for all the patients, 17 days for the CAR T procedure. Slightly fewer than half of the patients also required an ICU stay as part of that inpatient stay. For those with an ICU transfer, they spent a median of 13 days in the ICU. I want to repeat, this is the first year. People might be being a little cautious. We could talk about that further if you like. Total paid amounts for CAR T from all sources. Again, this is the paid amount, the allowed amount. What we statisticians have a technical term for is lumpy. Okay, there was a lot of variation in there that we tried to sort out. It varied widely on whether or not the patients were treated in a clinical trial. Not surprising there, patients in a trial. Excuse me, their CAR T was paid for by the sponsors of the trial. Whether or not the hospital was reimbursed under the standard Medicare inpatient prospective payment system or through PPS exempt payment systems. Okay, not a lot of time, unless there's interest in it, to talk about what's the difference between the standard inpatient prospective payment system and PPS exempt cancer hospitals. But if there's, we can discuss that further if there's interest in that. Let me close with the key points. This is what we found. Older patients with multiple comorbidities can be treated successfully with CAR T. And by treated successfully, we mean reduction in hospitalizations, less time in the hospital pre versus post, significantly fewer ED visits, lower total healthcare costs. If I might give a quick acknowledgement to I'll bring it back. Sorry, I just want to give a quick acknowledgement to my colleagues at Avalere, at Kite Pharma, Gilead Company, and at the Adult Bone Marrow Transplant unit of Memorial Sloan Kettering. The brilliant things that we found here are largely due to them. All the mistakes, misstatements, and lack of clarity is entirely my responsibility. Thank you.